Okay, you can tell me about how objective your scholarship is, but when you refuse to stock books by Evangelical Presses, you're no longer objective. Providentially, I learned that academic respectability is a myth a long time ago. And here's where it started for me. When I went to the Ivy League, I have an MA from Penn, University of Pennsylvania. My field was Egyptology and ancient history, and had some Old Testament in there, some Hebrew. One day I had some time to kill before class, and I decided to go to the Semitics reading room. I mean, the University of Pennsylvania has been around for hundreds of years. It's got this revered, Semitics program. And I went there and I was feeling a little impish, I guess, that day. And I thought, I'll bet in an hour or two, I can do this. I'm going to go through all of the stacks of the books here. And I'm going to look to see how many evangelical publishers I can find. How many of these books are written in an evangelical press? I found one book. One book. It was R.K. Harrison's Introduction to the Old Testament. Okay, that taught me a lesson. I don't want to hear about your objectivity anymore. Okay, you can tell me about how objective your scholarship is, but when you refuse to stock books by evangelical presses, you're no longer objective.
Gotcha, yeah.
Because I can go to an evangelical seminary library and pull off the non-evangelical books, and there'll be thousands of them.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it anymore. So I don't know what stuck that in my head to do that, but I actually killed a couple hours one night going through the stacks just to see. So, we have this notion that as people who take the scripture seriously, that we need to sort of sound less, academics would use the word sound less fundamentalish, but less, less evangelical, less predisposed to thinking uncritically about the scriptures to be respected. That's just bunk, okay? Because they don't do it. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's one point. The other point is you can do that. You can play that game. But as soon as someone finds out that, you actually believe like in a Trinity, you actually believe that Jesus was God incarnate. Okay, we love your work, but you're just a little out to lunch there. In other words, your confessional scholarship knocks you down a few notches. Now, there are exceptions. Not every academic who's not a Christian thinks this way, but a lot of them do. A lot of them do. So I think a lot of evangelical scholars are fearful of sort of losing face or having a bit of a less reputation. But I know a number of them that have thrown that to the wind. And, generally, they have the reputation established and people sort of already know, where they're at. And they're good. But again, if they drift off, this is why, again, I appreciate the scholars who have endorsed the book. Because again, if you put them in certain settings, they would be criticized for doing so. But the ones who have endorsed the book, it's like, we're fine. We understand what's going on here. And I think they're at the point in their own spiritual lives, their own academic careers, where they can say, look, the onus is really on you. The onus is really on you, because all of these things start with the assumption that there is a God. If there's a God, can he create beings like himself? Well, if he's God, why couldn't he? And if he can do that, and he can give them certain attributes, why can't they do some of these things that we see in the Old Testament? By what logic is this eliminated now? If God really can do miraculous things, then on what basis do we eliminate these other things? I mean, in other words, they've put the thought in, and they can see that, the onus is really on you, because all of this fundamentally goes back to one question: is there a God or not? And if that proposition is coherent, and it certainly is, I mean, people who aren't even believers have defended it well, historically, just in terms of sheer logic, okay? If that proposition holds, then you don't really have any intellectual basis to chop these other things off at their knees.